Before we start this video, a large thank you to Gustavo, Grumble, Sly Ninja, a name I unfortunately cannot pronounce. Thank you for the support, my friend. Hyperverse, Lincoln, Devin, an individual who wishes to remain anonymous. Thank you so much for the support, my friend. It is greatly appreciated, sincerely. Fabio and Mooch for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Hello guys, today we're going to sync our take block damage functionality. So if we go to the damage glider base class here, you can see here we have a check for block. And if we go back to the melee weapon damage glider, what we can do is essentially just copy this whole assortment of sending a server RPC and paste it right here. Now, actually to be more clear and less confusing, what we can actually do instead is just override check for block since it's a virtual void. And then we can paste the logic in the melee weapon damage glider so you can kind of see it side by side. So let's just do that. So if I come over here now and I go to the melee weapon damage glider, I'm just going to type override, the keyword, and then I'm going to override the check for block. I'm going to paste all of the original block functionality here because it works out identically for what we want to do. And also I am just going to go down here and copy the functionality where we send a server RPC. This is in the bottom of deal damage in the last episode. And we're going to paste that here and we're going to change some things. So as you know before, we're basically playing the effect on both sides. But as you know, in the effect, some things only take effect if you're the owner. Like we can't change server variables unless we're the owner. So we only allow that to be done on the owner's side. So we're going to do this exact same thing here, and we're going to have to also do the additional step of making is blocking a network variable, and I'll explain why in a minute. So let's comment out this code here where we actually process the effect instantly, and instead let's just send a server RPC right here to this character. And what that's going to do is, it doesn't exist yet, but it's going to do the same thing that the previous one did, where it's going to just basically process the effect on their end, but we're going to notify that they have the effect from our end when we hit them. So let's go to the character network manager, and I'm going to call this notify server of character blocked damage. And then I'm going to just create this function, and it is very similar to what we had before. So for the most part, we can kind of copy and paste a lot of things, but it will differ in a couple important steps. So let's go to the character network manager now, and I'm going to scroll right to the bottom, look for where we had that previous damage animation step 2. And I believe it's, right down here. So that variable isn't a deep blue, it's like a faded blue, which means it's not being used. I'm going to check that out in a minute because it should be being used, the character causing damage I'm speaking of. So I'm going to make a public, you can make a virtual if you want, virtual void for notify server of character blocked damage. And what I'm going to do is copy every variable from the original take damage RPC. Now you'll remember that on our blocked effect, we don't need a few things. Like we don't need the contact point X, Y, or Z unless you're instantiating some sparks or something. This is just where we would instantiate the blood, the position in the world. So instead I'm going to replace the first one with stamina damage, and I'm going to erase Z and Y because we don't need it. And from there we can start writing some logic. So we want to be able to also, this is a server RPC of course, we want to be able to make it so anybody can use the server RPC. So like if I hit you, I can use the server RPC on you from my end. So for that, we need to make sure that we require ownership is equal to false. Otherwise, I can't call it when I hit your game object from your game object. Next, we're going to check for if we are the server. And if we are, we're going to process this effect from every single client that's present. So everybody sees, there's a sound effect that plays from this client, for example. So everyone hears that sound effect because the effect will play on everybody's end. But some parts of the effect can only be used by the owner, which is fine. That's exactly what we want. So again, contact point X can be replaced by stamina damage, and we can erase Z and Y. So what happens next? Well, if we go up here to what we had before, we had a function where we actually use a client RPC now to send this to everybody. So let's do the exact same thing. And you know what? You can make this protected virtual void if you want to override it. But thinking back on this now, from what I have in my game, Nephilim, and all these effects are really final by this point, you're never going to override them for an AI, but if you want to, you can make it as such. If you want to override it, give AI and players certain extra precautions. In this project, I'm not going to. I'm just going to make them a public void and then a private void because they're not going to change in terms of processing the actual effect. But if it is different for your game, like I said, totally make it virtual if you want to override it in some cases and add or change some logic. So what do we need now? Well, we can go back up here and you can see this is not being used, and this is why I accidentally put the wrong spot. The take damage effect.character causing damage should be network objects spawn manager character causing damage, not the damage target. That's my bad. So that actually was a mistake. that will get the wrong, basically buff variables and all that stuff if you were calculating damage. So yeah, that's fixed. Now copy and paste everything down here. Change take damage to take blocked damage effect. Instantiate the take blocked damage effect from our world character effects manager. And like I said, there's no contact point, so erase that. But there is stamina damage. So typically I think we set it up so stamina damage is always equal to poise damage. But you know, you can say take block damage dot stamina damage is equal to stamina damage. However you want to set it up, set up your variables how you wish them to be here. Now you can erase is invulnerable if you want, but honestly I wouldn't. Just because it can cause some weird behaviors if you're invulnerable and happen to block. Like you'll still get locked into an animation and you could still get guard broken. It would just be kind of strange. I'm just going to keep it there because there's probably never going to be a time where you actually are invulnerable and blocking. If it is, it's probably an error. So now over on the melee damage cloud again, we're just going to basically fill in these variables here and take block damage. It should be not take damage, but take block damage. I think my mouse is double clicking because every single time I try to highlight something today, and then control over it, it just does this. So I think it's time for a new mouse. Anyway, replace take damage effect with take block damage because that's the name of the variable now. And you can get rid of X, Y, and Z, and then you can simply put in stamina damage, and you should be good to go. But then we have one last problem, and that problem being we have no way of knowing if the other character we're hitting is blocking because this variable is local. So if they're blocking on their end, they're not blocking on our end, so we would just send them a normal damage RPC because there's no way for us to know if they're blocking. So to remedy this, as most of you probably know, we need to change the is blocking variable here to a network variable. And if you know how to do that, pause the video right now and go and do that because that's a great learning experience. I highly encourage you to go do that if you know how to do it. You don't need to watch me, don't do it at all. Now, if you don't, that's fine. We're going to do it. It's the same process as before. So first, we want to start by going to the character manager and deleting the original as blocking. And that will let us know everywhere in the project where we now have an error, which is convenient because now we know where to call it from and replace it from. So we'll delete it from the character manager here and then open up the character network manager. And we're going to make it as a network flag. And I will call this a combat flag. So that's where I'm going to put it. And we're going to initialize it as false, of course, naturally. And then we're going to start basically just fixing where the old is blocking was and where it needs to be. This is the bad thing about refactoring in terms of something like Netcode, because if you're new to this, a lot of this is probably not making much sense to you, which I feel bad for because I'm making these videos for educational purposes. So if you haven't checked out the Elden Ring series and you are new to Netcode, please go do that because you'll learn a lot more. You can learn this way, but it's going to be a slog if you're not sure what's going on. So yeah, so anywhere we had the is blocking variable, just replace it with character network manager dot is blocking dot value, the same as before, and you should be good to go. So let's just go and look over everywhere. There's only 16 places, so that's not too terrible. Yes, the animator here, same thing. We're setting it to the network variable, and then we'll be fine. So while I'm doing this, I'm just going to talk over and explain what I was just saying before in more detail. Guys, I make these videos because, first and foremost, I want to help people in game to learn something. Understand that sometimes you got to copy and paste what you see on screen if you don't understand. But I don't like making videos when people don't understand stuff. And I've gotten a few messages on the Dark Souls series. A lot of you totally know what's up, and that's cool. A lot of you are like, I've done Netcode before, or I've watched Netcode videos before this, and this is all making sense to you, and that's perfect. If you're one of those people, fantastic, lovely, that's great. But if you're one of those people who is watching this and you're not sure what's happening, I really encourage you to go check out Netcode videos or the Elden Ring series because you will learn a lot more, and then you'll be able to come back to this and you'll know why I'm doing these things. And that is ultimately why I'm making the videos, is so that you walk away knowing more. But anyway, tangent aside, apologies. We'll continue. Whatever I'm doing here now, you can see that I'm just essentially replacing the old is blocking with the new is blocking position, and that's entirely it. So over here on the take block damage effect, we need to do one more thing. Remember how I said before some things should only be ran in the host? Well, we don't need to play this animation because animation is handled from the character who's playing it since it's server RPC. So we're just going to say if character is not owner, return. And you can see here, everything below this won't be played if we're not the owner. And that's fine. And where we calculate the damage, just like on the take damage effect, let's also do an if is not owner return right at the top. Because again, we can't change network variables if we're not an owner. And this is looking to change our HP, so that would give us an error. So if we're not the owner, let's just return down here. Okay, and we can save that. And that should be nearly good. We need to run a few tests because we could be missing a couple of things, but I think we're almost ready now. So We still have 7 errors, so you have to fix those too. So let's just go over here again, paste that. If we, again, checking for block on the character network manager now instead of the manager. Same thing over here, checking for block here, save that. I think there's only a couple left now. Let's see, yeah. So these animator states are great, and I'm gonna explain why these animator pools, because now that we have a network variable, basically, animator transitions that are handled from variables like isBlocking will now be automatically updated for us, provided we put them in the right place. Because isBlocking is a network variable, if the host changes it, it changes for everybody. So that's the benefit of having these as network variables, because if they're tied to something like an animation state, the animator will update on everybody else's end accordingly as well, which is fantastic. Okay, so that's all of the errors. Now if I go into the game, I'm hitting blocking, and you can see if you check in the inspector there, this is on the other screen, I'm on the other client tapping the isBlocking button now. It turns on and off, but I'm not playing the animation. Okay, so we do have a problem still. But you can see here the isBlocking bool is toggling. I'm actually on the other client pressing it. So let's go check out our character manager, because I'm blocking on this and then it updates the animation. So here's the problem. Copy every bool to the animator and put it above the if_is_owner. So we can just put this if_is_owner and then put that right below here, because the blocking variable here, as I just said, now if I go into the game and block, it should block normally because it's tied to the network variable, and it does. Cool, excellent. So now the last thing we need to do is actually make sure that this is working in terms of processing the effects. So let's go ahead and do that. What I'm going to do is just put my host here on a permanent block, and I'm going to attack them with the client. So here we go. I've got blocking enabled, and yes, it does. It plays the animation and the sound effect, and everything else is playing. So guys, that most likely works. I say most likely because we don't have our UI backup yet, and we're going to restore the UI in the next video, and we're going to make sure that only the host can update the UI properly, and the other characters on screen can't. So, as I said before, I just want to make this one last final remark. If you are still totally okay with trotting through this, and you know what's happening, and you understand that the process of a refactor this deep into the series for Netcode is going to be very confusing if you don't know what's up, that's totally cool. I apologize for repeating myself. I just really want to hit home that I want everybody who comes to these videos to walk away having learned something. That's what's most important to me. So, as usual, guys, if you did learn something today, please leave a like, drop a comment. It really does help the series out a whole lot. I know it's like a broken record, but I do appreciate the people who do that and take the time to do that. And as always, a special thank you to my Patrons. I appreciate each and every one of you so much. I'll see you guys in the next episode when we actually restore our UI and we make it so only our host can affect what's on the UI. All right, guys, have a great week.